My mother is always growing plants at home. She tells me that this garden is a food forest.
That this flower bed is her way of making beauty.
Naturally, I never question her methods. She gives me aloe vera for cuts and sweet mint for anxiety. She insists that
spending time outdoors is good spending, and that any patch of dirt can be what you make it.
You just have to be resilient. And resilient, my mom has been.
Despite the great Texas freeze that splintered plants to their roots.
Despite Hurricane Harvey, Laura, and barrel-waving tragedy into my mom's garden, the work and trust in each leaf blown away by the wind. But the barren trees were only lying dormant.
Even facing 110-degree heat,
my mom's garden perseveres. She protects the plants with persistence and prayer. With persistence and prayer. But my mom can't nurture nature if we continue to desecrate the planet.
Because we're fighting freezes
and floods and fires. Already, our bodies reflect the climate's changes. In Texas this past summer, the heat and hurricanes reminded me what the human body can't withstand.
In California this year, both drought and eczema continuously split open my skin.
Our bodies listen to the planet better than our systems do. While my mother's garden helps to heal me,
it can't help my friends in New York who have asthma because of air pollution.
Or disguise the smell of the landfill by my home in Humble, Texas.
It can't solve the pounds of plastic I passed by in Taipei.
Or clean the river of Villa 21 in Buenos Aires because every cup of water I had needed boiling. We all know
freezes
and floods and fires.
It's simple to see the complexity of our problems.
The damage in our roots. But we can only grow so much from spoiled soil.
Our gardens can only guard us against so much.
We're accustomed to confronting calamities and collateral.
Sustaining our core means centering our climate's capital.
We must dismantle the systems that poison our Earth's mantle. During this climate emergency,
we must merge and see hope.
We must emerge and seed that hope. Though hope can be hurt by a hurricane, it doesn't dissipate with the dust. It lies dormant.
The call comes from beneath your feet.
Hold all the hope you can't see.
This earth is Mother Earth,
our mother's earth. And the future of this planet depends on us to plan it.
So be the echo of love
in this ecosystem, the ripple of right through all the wrongs. Every gardener understands the importance of helping hands, of turning the earth for new possibilities.
Poets, Ariana, Lee, and Kyla, and Danny, everybody. Thank you so much. We just witnessed this beautiful gift to SOCAP, a piece, thank you so much, designed to walk us through the threshold of our regular lives and into a space of convening. Ariana, Houston's Youth Poet Laureate, and Kylan, a two-time Metaphor Houston champion. They come to us through an incredible partnership through the incredible Tireless Leaders Youth Speaks, and I would like to ask you to please join me in another round of applause for the incredible poets.
Thanks, Michelle. I don't know about you, but I came out of the land ceremony this morning feeling connected to the land we walk on, to the air we breathe, and to each of you. And the verses we heard just now helped lift my heart into a creative space. Hi all, I'm Katie. My first time at SOCAP was 10 years ago as an impact entrepreneur, and today I'm here as the CEO of the Sorensen Impact Institute. While I'm here this week, I'm looking to find balance between poetry and doing deals, between great conversations with each of you, and spending enough alone time to restore my introverted self hanging out in the trees. I'm an American Southerner by birth, and I now live in the mountains by choice. I have a deep passion for ice cream. And now I can't make it through a conversation these days without talking about the relationship between local food systems and scalable solutions. Hannah?
Hello, SOCAP. I'm Hannah, Serenity by name, that's the meaning in Arabic, and change maker by nature. Speaking of food, I think it's safe to say that my home country, Morocco, has one of the best. And we beat you all at football, or I mean soccer. I spent the last 15 years bridging gaps between the haves and have-nots through social entrepreneurship and through writing. My last book is called Being Other, The Beauty and Power of Being an Outsider. My jam, empowering Black, Indigenous, and women of color through driving impact ventures in Africa, Europe, and beyond, blending tech, sustainability, and creative leadership. I may or may not Gaga dance by the end of this gathering, and if you don't know what it means, ask me. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Arevalo. I am the Executive Director for Content and Strategy at SOCAP, which means my global team and I get to spend most of the year keeping our ears to the ground, listening, weaving, understanding, and convening some of the most interesting conversations in impact for you over the next 3 days. As a global Ecuadorian, I'd like to take a moment to appreciate the full circle moment standing here. A number of years ago, I took a 14-hour flight and arrived to San Francisco wide-eyed, not knowing what to expect at my first SOCAP. I returned to my home in Quito with a clear vision of what a vibrant ecosystem looks like, and since then, I have observed SOCAP's impact all around the world, but especially in Latin America, as instrumental in inspiring the creation of local impact funds, accelerators, and communities of practice, including my own in my hometown. I am also, for those of you who know me better and know this, I am a very goofy mother of twin boys, and much like Katie, I'm addicted to French mountain air. And as a fellow foodie, Hannah, I am a serious consumer of dark chocolate, of which we have tons around this conference. Friends, I know Katie mentions that for some of us who attended the land ceremony, we felt connected to the place where we are at today. As we get ready to embark on this path together, we would like to call to stage Greg Castro, Cultural Director of the Ramaytush Ohlone Association and tireless advocate for the preservation of his cultural heritage for a land acknowledgement of the land where we convene today. Thank you. Greg?
Thanks.
Hershatuhi, greetings, relatives. Welcome to Yalamo, which some people mistakenly call this area San Francisco now. But our ancestors have been here for a very long time. My name is Greg Castro. I'm Totralslinen, Rumsen, and Ramaytush Ohlone, 3 lineages of Central California. We have been here since time immemorial. And despite the recent 2.5 centuries of gentrification, colonization, and genocide, we still are here and we still remember our original instructions, and that's to take care of the land that gave birth to us and take care of all the living things on it. And even though the living things that are on it now are very different than our ancestors experienced, the instructions still remain, and we still remember them, and we still are daily trying to fulfill that sacred obligation we've given to us by Creator, to take care of the land and take care of all the living things on it, and that includes visitors such as yourself. So thank you for being here today. I'd like to share a song, as my elders taught me to start off things in a good way, just like other elements of our culture, whether it's dance or ritual or ceremony or stories. Songs are prayers, and prayers are what we use to renew on a continual basis the relationship to us and our Mother Earth and to Creator and to all of creation. It's what binds us together. And so I like to share this song, good luck song for the start off of this week for you, and hopefully good things will happen. Ahi-yo-way, awala-wela. Ahi-yo-way, awala-wela. Ahi-yo-way, awala-wela. Ahi-yo-way, awala-wela. Hawaii tule, waya tule, wala-wela. Hawaii tule, waya tule, wala-wela. Ahi-yo-way, awala-wela. Ahi-yo-way, awala-wela. Ahiowe, oh Wallawella, Ahiowe, oh Wallawella, Hawaii Tule, Waya Tule, Wallawella, Hawaii Tule, Waya Tula, Wallawella, Ahiowe, oh Wallawella, Ahiowe, oh Wallawella, Ahiowe, oh Wallawella, Ahiowe, oh Wallawella, Hawaii Tule, Waya Tule, Wallawella, Hawaii Tule, Waya Tula, Wallawella. Ahiowe, oh Wallawella, Ahiowe, oh Wallawella. Oh, oh, oh. Hajj Manikan. Enjoy your week.
Thank you, Greg, for welcoming us to this land. May we commit to learning and listening. May this community commit to being part of a society that will create a roadmap to reconciliation. Friends, the theme of SOCAP24, Going Deeper, Catalyzing Systems Change, encourages our community to critically examine our practices and challenge ourselves to delve deeper. Depth is our mandate for the next 3 days and beyond to bring about the structural and irreversible change for good that we're all seeking. So, in the name of depth, I would like to invite us to take risks and rise to the challenge of complexity together. So, speaking of risks.
Speaking of risk, we'll take a little one right now together, shall we? We want to extend a special welcome to you, your authentic you, your highest self. We invite you to close your eyes. We'll travel inward for a moment together. Let's take a deep breath. Hold. Feel the air going into your lungs, to your stomach, and your entire in-breath. Feel your out-breath. Continue to breathe. Feel the potential in this space, the energy of shared purpose. Notice your body. Breathe into any sensation that emerges without judgment.
Now, turn your attention inward. Ask yourself, what is most alive in me right now? What is that contribution that I deeply hope to make through my work? Breathe into this awareness and send it love.
Next, please open your eyes and turn to the person next to you. Remember, not talk, turn. Remember the responsibility we acknowledged in the land ceremony this morning to take care of the land. Keep looking at the person next to you. I can see you. Even though the lights are bright, I can see you. Turn one way or the other and look in the eyes of the person next to you. Remember the responsibility we acknowledged in the land ceremony this morning to take care of the land and to take care of ourselves, all living things on it, including yourself and the person who you are still looking at.
Now shake their hands for as long as you want. At this point, hug them if you'd like. Greet them with the same depth of presence you've just connected with within yourself.
Okay, now you can break that bond. I know it was a bit awkward. But when you are ready, come back to yourself for one more minute. One last deep breath with a stretch. Eso. I am so thankful that you accompanied us with this really like a little bit of a risky exercise because the whole point is to feel connected to those around you, grounded in your purpose for being here at SOCAP, And overall, just remember that we're here to show up authentically as full human beings. We're not here just to exchange cards. We're also here to exchange thank yous, gratitudes, handshakes that are honest. And who knows, I saw 1 or 2 hugs out there, so hugs as well. Katie, how did that feel?
It felt wonderful. I needed to stretch. I've been up a long time. Whether you came with colleagues and friends or not, I hope you just made a friend in that moment. And the first friend we'd like to welcome to the stage is SOCAP board member Rodney Foxworth. Rodney is an executive, an entrepreneur, and an investor with deep and diverse networks across economic development, impact investing, philanthropy, and venture capital. Rodney gains his inspiration in this work from a deep-seated love for the triumph of good over evil. He owns more than 5,000 comic books. Please join me in welcoming an impact superhero in the flesh, Rodney Foxworth.
Thank you. Wow, I mean, to have my deepest, darkest secret revealed to everyone today. I think most people probably realize I was a huge nerd anyway, but thank you for that, Katie. I'm really honored to be welcoming you all today. Katie mentioned, she shared a little bit ago that her first SOCAP was 10 years ago. This is my 9th SOCAP. Just by a show of hands, how many people, this is your first time at SOCAP? Just curious. Wow. Wow. That's extraordinary. I asked that question because I know for the first time I attended SOCAP, it was quite overwhelming. It was a remarkable experience, but I didn't quite know what I was there for and how to interact and how to engage with people. But over the years, the SOCAP community had been such a powerful contributor to all the things that I was working on. It helped me launch one company, it helped me rebuild another organization. All the relationships, the resources that I was able to identify and work through at SOCAP have been tremendously valuable for me. In fact, when I think about it, I oftentimes reflect on the fact that this community, which you're entering to, many of you, was so valuable that it actually really shifted so much of how I worked, how I thought about things. I would say that so many people in this room today have been at the forefront of taking on the growth of the impact investing sector, have been courageous and brave when the sector has been attacked, when issues like DEI, the attack on ESG has come up and continues to persist. The people in this room, the folks that have been a part of the SOCAP community, were the first people and institutions at the forefront to make a claim that the future is impact, right? And so that is why this is such a valuable experience for me and for all of you here. Now, in a few moments, you're going to hear about sort of the originating story of impact investing. And you may have recognized that last week, the GIN reported that the sector has grown to nearly $1.6 trillion under management. So we're going to hear about sort of how we got to this place, but also want to just reflect and just mention to you all my belief that the people in this room are going to be people who are going to be responsible for shaping the growth and future of impact investing. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodney, for your unwavering commitment to SOCAP. The SOCAP board is the absolute best, and we have a particular board president that almost never makes it out here, but I wanted to take a minute to say thank you, Robert, as well. Friends, we've all had those strange moments when our extended family, and sometimes our own family, I know that this is the case with my own mom, where I have a really hard time explaining what impact investment is about. Can you raise your hand if you've had that moment? I see a few hands raised where people are like, what? Impact investment? That's not a thing. Well, the truth is that this movement is relatively recent. And yet it has grown incredibly strong, as Rodney just mentioned. For every community like this one, the ritual of discussing and evolving our own origin stories is key to rekindling the fire that unites us. Today, we're fortunate to have with us some of the pioneers, if I may call them elders, of impact investing, here to share some of their own origin stories with us.
Let's give a warm welcome to Nina Subarval Batra. Yes, please, applause. Yes. A force of nature in the world of social investment. As CEO of AVPN, Asia's largest social investment network, she has quadrupled its membership and expanded its reach across the region. Her influence extends beyond as she serves on multiple boards, including the Menzies Foundation and the Global Resilient Cities Network. I also heard she ran an art gallery at some point. Welcome, Nina.
Welcome, Nina.
Please join me in welcoming Anthony Bug Levine to the stage, a trailblazer in impact investing. Anthony was one of the conveners at that first Bellagio meeting in 2007, where the term impact investing was coined. Beyond his vast experience across the impact investing continuum, he also knows the continuum of the US highway system, as he once rode his bike all the way from DC to San Francisco. Not this weekend, though, for SOCAP.
Now, please get ready to get inspired by my good friend, Rodrigo Villar, the visionary behind New Ventures Group, and a driving force in Latin America's impact investment ecosystem and inspirations for so many of us. As the founder of multiple initiatives like Adobe Capital and Flee, Rodrigo is also known for throwing the absolute best parties in Mérida.
Please join me in welcoming James Mwangi, founder and CEO of Africa Climate Ventures, who is spearheading climate-smart and carbon-negative businesses across the continent. James actually started his change-making career by writing a play in high school that was so controversial, it was banned. Welcome, James.
And last but not least, Emily Castriel. Emily is a seasoned media executive and journalist. She's reported and led projects for the BBC across 5 continents, and she's trained over 1,000 people in deep listening techniques to help bridge divides across the globe. Emily has an upcoming book, Deep Listening, Transforming the Way We Connect with Family, Friends, Coworkers, and even foes. She even illustrated her own book with watercolors. Emily, the impact investing elders, friends or foes, are all yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much, Katie, Hannah, and Michelle. Well, a very good morning from me, from Nina, from Anthony, Rodrigo, and from James. Now, just a little bit of a warning while you're still kind of waking up and you might not have had enough coffee. So I have asked all these guys to be a bit mischievous during our panel, yeah? And I want you to be the judge if in 20 minutes they have succeeded. And I know that we are going to have such a compelling panel for you that the only reason you're going to check your devices is to share on social media using the hashtag SOCAP24. So we're going to be talking about origin stories. Now, there's a real compelling beauty but also a danger in a single origin story. So we've got 4 of them, and 4 personal stories that you're going to hear. So I want you guys to tell me, but in only 45 seconds, how you began the path on your own journey in the world of impact investing. So let me go first to you, Anthony Bug Levine.
Sure. So I'm South African originally. You wouldn't know from my accent. I moved back after college in 1996. The government was 2 years old. The Constitution was 2 months old when I arrived. We were the freest people the world had ever known on paper. Right to housing, education, water, things we don't have as rights in America. But it was very clear from the work I was doing at the South African Human Rights Commission that having freedom on paper didn't secure you freedom in a capitalistic system if you didn't have access to capital and control of it. That was one experience that led me down a path that ultimately got me into the world of management consulting, where my colleagues worked on a report that said there's $100 trillion in the global capital markets. I put those 2 things together and realized that the problem in this world is not that we need more money, it's that we need to activate more money for impact. And it was that insight that then led me to where I was and where we all now are here today.
Thank you very much. And in fact, it was at a meeting that you helped convene that the term was first used. Is that
That's
right?
right. So in 2007, I convened a group of people from financial services, nonprofits, and elsewhere. And again, the impact investing is not a new idea. It's been around hundreds of years. Every cultural tradition has some form of this core idea that a for-profit investment can be a morally effective and economically effective way to solve a social problem. The idea that investing should only focus on financial return is actually new. So we didn't invent anything. But what we did do was create language that allowed people to come together, people who thought of themselves as green investors, microfinance investors, housing investors. After that meeting in 2007, we were able to say we're actually part of the same movement. Right around the same time, SOCAP started. So many things everyone in this room has been a part of.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And now to you, Naina Subawal Batra. Can you tell me your origin story?
Well, Emily, I definitely feel old, haven't been referred to as an elder before. But, after Anthony coined the word in 2007, I stumbled into it by accident in 2008. I joined an organization called Monitor Inclusive Markets and learned how businesses that actually served people at the bottom of the pyramid or provided employment opportunities were actually great investments that had huge social impact. And, as Anthony said, it's not something that's new. These businesses have been around for a while. They were just never considered to be financially, looked at as being good investments, while at the same time focusing on what they were actually creating, which were vibrant social communities in India, which is where I'm from.
And what do you think, is there anything that is distinct about impact investing and the way it's thought about in India or in the Asian culture?
So it's very, I would say, not understood, even today. All investments are thought to be impactful. In fact, that's what we hear again and again, what makes an impact investment different from any other investment. And I think the intentionality on actually building impact in right from the very beginning is something that we still find hard to communicate, not just in India, but in all of Asia. And I think that's the challenge.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And now to you, Rodrigo Villa. What's your impact investment origin story?
To be very honest, I think I was very lucky. I did my MBA degree in Melbourne about 21 years ago. When I got back to Mexico, I was trying to get a position doing venture capital, which I was looking for. And I just figured out there was nothing. And eventually I got this position from a program that was started by the World Resources Institute called New Ventures. And the program was the idea was to convince the private sector to get involved in conservation and environment. We figured out that there was not enough philanthropic money to solve the environmental problem, so private capital could work for that, but eventually we need to convince the private sector that was feasible. So the idea of New Venture was to prove that investing in conservation could be profitable, and that way we could kind of shake a little bit the private sector to put their eyes to invest more in environment. And I just love it. So because I think my job was to find companies and help them to access investors or venture capitalists. And I didn't know anything about conservation, but what I just figure out is that I haven't met a single person that hates environment. So everybody wants to do something. So what I learned is that probably my position, my job is to create opportunities for people that actually like to do that, to be able to do it. I think a lot of people want to work in this field, but there are not enough opportunities or no different places to work on that. So that's the way I started. It was 20 years ago. I never thought I never thought I was going to be an elderly from the sector, but I'm here, and thanks to Anthony and all these people that created an ecosystem of movement, I'm lucky to be here.
I love it when you said, I love it, because didn't you get that real feel of kind of personal passion as you said it? It's fantastic. And now let me turn to you, James Mwangi.
So the first thing, one version of this is in 2007, I had just moved to South Africa. I was from Kenya, had spent a chunk of my career in the US. And I was gnashing my teeth at not being invited to the event in Bellagio that Anthony hosted. But I was doing a lot of work advising on inclusive and sustainable growth and development in Africa. And everywhere I turned, at home in Kenya and elsewhere, I saw people with a lot of potential needing capital, right? They weren't necessarily they did not need just help from the outside. They just needed a way to unleash their own potential. And it seemed to me that any lens that allowed us to ask, how do we get capital to the people who need it the most, would probably, in more cases than not, lead to situations where you could generate meaningful returns. Over the years, of course, you run into folks who oversimplify that to the point that was made that, hey, any investment is impact investing. But I think that initial realization that there was such a need for capital to unleash this huge endowment of talent and potential was really what got me started. And not being invited to the party.
Glad we could be motivating.
Yeah, well, it's good that you are here. And in fact, it's a pretty impressive global representation here, in that we've only got 4 guests to have people from four corners. And I'm wondering, James, when you started on your journey, and I know it's kind of hard to imagine that now, when there's such a massive movement, relatively, and there's a great big conference of people from all over the globe, as well as all the people tuning in virtually. Hard to imagine that 20 years ago, this really was early stage. And I'm wondering, how did the young James, bright-eyed, enthusiastic, only 7, he looks like about 27, how did you explain to your parents what the hell you were up to?
My parents have been on a journey of steadily diminishing expectations about my earning potential. Since the day I graduated college, frankly, since the day I decided not to go to med school. So the most recent step was when I stepped away from what seemed like a very lucrative, potentially corporate path to do this. And what I said to them was, I genuinely believe that it will be possible, it has to be possible to do reasonably well while doing meaningful good. And you see it, I want at the end of my life to say, actually, here's all of the ways I contributed positively to people around me. They said they would be proud of it, but I could see that kind of like, yeah, just make sure you do well. But no, that's the way I said it, is how do you find ways to get business to actually, or capital to actually improve the lives of people at scale?
And I'm wondering, I'm waiting for these guys to be mischievous yet. They've not yet demonstrated, but I know they will, by the way. But I'm just wondering if there was any story or any example that you were able to give in those early days in order to help people really get it.
I think we're still trying to find that example to help people really get it. I mean, it's crazy that we still have to make people understand why this is important. Yeah. You're talking to us and you're talking to a room full of the converted as to why impact investing exists today, but yet it's only $1.5 trillion, and it needs to be so much more.
Yeah. And I do think the stories have to be about tracing, beginning from the end, which is the impact we have. Yeah. I think too often conversations and panels like this become about the mediation, which is the money. How big is my fund? How much money am I raising? What am I doing? I mean, my lesson from the very beginning is you start from, someone says, what is impact investing? Start from a story. There is someone whose life is different today because something, and then trace back to the investors. It's something I learned the first time I presented this to the Rockefeller Foundation board. One of the board members said to me, I like your pre-reading, it's very persuasive, but tell me a story. And I think that's, find one that resonates with your audience. You all know you're here because you believe and you've seen that this is so powerful when it works. But never forget to make this has to be about the people. That's the starting point, and not about all the technical things that we sometimes get, I'd say, distracted by.
Interestingly, sometimes impact investing sometimes succeeds in ways that it hides its own traces, right? So I think about, I now live back home in Kenya, and every time I do a mobile money transaction, I know sitting at the back of that was a catalytic impact investment and a set of grants to get M-Pesa on its way. Every time I go to my bank, I know that it was heavily backed by impact investors to begin with to get it to scale to be one of the biggest banks in the region. But today, it's just investment. Today, it's just capital. And sometimes, I think, to your point, Anthony, we can focus on how much money is explicitly impact investing money, or we can talk about the impact and the extent to which we've seeded things that actually migrate and cross almost the blood-brain barrier into just investing by catalyzing things that improve the lives of people.
I'm just going to ask you guys to do something a bit odd at them for a minute. I'm going to ask you to be silent because I want to turn to you guys to have a moment of reflection. Because you've heard these diverse origin stories, and you too could have chosen a different path, but you have chosen to pursue a path at the intersection of meaning and money. And I want you just to spend a few moments to reflect on these stories that you heard and how they intersect with your own stories, your own narrative, your own values, and your own motivation. Thank you for those thoughts. So we've taken some few moments to look back at the origin story, but I want to now shift our vision to the future. We were hearing the brilliant poets talking about turning the earth to new possibilities just a few minutes ago. And so what's exciting you about these new possibilities for the next generation? What do you think are the biggest challenges which are needed to be tackled in order to really move the needle and exponentially scale impact investing? Let me turn to you, Rodrigo.
Definitely, I think we need to. My feeling is that impact investing refers a lot to finance, which is very important. But in order to do investments, you also need successful entrepreneurs. You need consumers that are aware of this, and you need to create a whole ecosystem. And I think the impact investment has been a movement, but I don't see it as an industry per se. So it's still complicated to explain. When you were asking James about the origins of, if 20 years ago I didn't know how to explain my family, and still I have tried for 20 years and haven't even made it. So I think we need to keep working. We need more examples, but I think we need to make all the world conscious that this economy, it's like a whole world of things that need to happen. It's not just investing. As Anthony was saying, we have been moving into technical terms, and we need to keep doing that, but we need to put our voices outside of these forums, out of this SOCAP, ABPN, or FLEECE, or conferences that happen across the world. They need to get more mainstream. But I think, for me, it's very important, and I think we need to find terms that are easy for people to understand. And I think, Anthony, you should go for a second book, trying to help us to really put this in.
I did the first book before I had a child. I saw my friends who were raising children. I thought the time they spend doing that, I can write a book. But now I have one, so it's not competitive.
Yeah, so it's the storytelling. Naina, what do you think are the biggest challenges? Like, to be honest here, yeah, because there's all this great celebratory talk, but what really do we need to home in on?
So I think it's really interesting, and you mentioned it. The three of us here are actually from the Global South, but less than 5% of the impact investments that are currently out there actually are in the Global South, are emerging from the Global South. I come from Asia. 66% of the world's population lives in Asia. We have more billionaires being created every day. We need to have more impact investment coming out of Asia. We need more products. We need more asset managers. We need more advisors, impact advisors in your new role that are actually out there, working in Asia. And I think that, to me, is both a challenge and a huge opportunity. I feel that the next generation in Asia is very conscious about the privilege that they're born with and the wealth that they've come into, and they want to make a difference. And it's our turn to actually really catalyze that into concrete investment, concrete capital walking out the door. And to Rodrigo's point, it means capital across the continuum, because you have to support social businesses right from the very beginning. So from blueprint to scale, really, really looking at going there.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And just to pick up on that, I think I am incredibly hopeful about the talented people I meet. It's been an absolute privilege for 20 years to be meeting, I hate to be exclusionary, the best, most talented, committed people are in this work. The biggest challenge, I think, and also I don't think we have to convince people anymore to make a difference. I think people want to. That was a different challenge 20 years ago. The challenge is, how do you get people from intention to action? Exactly. And I think the greatest challenge is comfort. I believe that people in this room genuinely want to see whatever it is you're focused on, racial equity in the United States, climate transition, the work James is doing related to getting energy access in a way that is sustainable to everyone in Africa. I believe you guys want to make that happen, but I don't see yet, and I'm increasingly frustrated by the gap between what people genuinely believe. I don't think they're just saying it, and the actions you take. I'll just give you a specific example. I don't think you guys would deny that Africa has a moral, economic, and every other imperative to get energy to everyone in a way that's sustainable. I don't think anyone, to your point earlier, no one's going to disagree with that. If that takes $1 trillion over the next decade, or whatever the exact number is, and James was being too academic, it wouldn't give me a number. Let's call it $1 trillion. That's $110 billion initiatives, depending on how you break it down. If you guys are not, after this conversation, running to see James on stage and say, how can I get you $10 billion? Then we're not serious about getting to the result that we genuinely want. Because this is one of the most accomplished, experienced people in our generation. If we can't get him $10 billion, or we think that's a crazy idea, do you think the next 99 are going to be easier or harder? And if we are not thinking in that way of actually getting this to do the change that we say we want and acting that way, I think we are going to ultimately not succeed in what we want to do. And for me personally, one thing I'd say to you all is, when you leave this conference, do one thing next week. Do something uncomfortable. Because I think it is the comfort of people in positions of power that is stopping us closing the gap between this intention and action. I quit my job 9 weeks ago to become a full-time impact investing advisor to help accelerate and deepen this work. That is deeply uncomfortable as a father of a 7-year-old to not have a job anymore. But I challenge you guys to do something from where you sit, to do something uncomfortable that can make a difference.
Thank you very much. So, here you've heard it. You are being gifted this invitation to do something uncomfortable when you leave SOCAP. So I feel that we've discussed so many things in this very, go on, you've got a very quick point, micro point.
Well, I'm not going to talk anyone out of Anthony hit the lead. Whenever someone is saying, come give you $10 billion, don't say anything, just keep quiet. But actually, at this moment, with all of the crises we face, an intentional approach to allocating the world's wealth is a matter of our collective survival as a species. And so for any of you who need that motivation that this matters, it's out there. We have the tools in our hands to avert our destiny, but we need to use them. And to Anthony's point, now is the time to take that decision, make that leap, and do the uncomfortable thing.
Thank you very much. So now is the time. Well, we've had so many brilliant ideas to kind of get us thinking at this moment. That the fact that we need capital to enable people to unleash their potential, that we need to amplify stories into the mainstream so we're not talking to each other only in this room, and that to move from intention to action, we need to get $10 billion, not only to James, but to 99 other people like James in order to move the needle. Well, I'd like to thank my brilliant guests. Thank you so very much. Naina Sabawal Batra, Anthony Buglavine, Rodrigo Villa, and James Mwangi. Thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kim. And then I have a little bit of time. Thank you. Friends, our next guest is the visionary founder and CEO behind Cheekbone Beauty, who is completely reinventing beauty standards and leading a movement to decolonize the industry. And as a woman of color myself, it means a lot. With her genius blend of sustainability, ethics, and artistry, Jen is redefining how we think about cosmetics, showing us that beauty can be empowering, socially responsible, and absolutely fun. Case in point, Jen became a superstar on social media by putting Cheeto powder on. Let's welcome Jen Harper.
Hello. Ani Buju, my name is Jen Harper, and as mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Cheekbone Beauty Cosmetics. I am coming to you from Canada, but I live and reside in Toronto and Niagara. Our business is headquartered in St. Catharines, Ontario. How did I launch a business when I was actually selling seafood for most of my career? Well, it all started with a dream I had back in 2015. There was 3 native little girls, and they were covered in lip gloss. When I woke up, I literally wrote down on the side of my bed to start a product, and at the time it was just a lip gloss, and use a portion of the profits to do something to support my Indigenous community. And at the time, I had no idea or what that looked like. I had spent then the next 2 years in product development, market research, all of those really important things in order to build a brand. But a really important part of the Cheekbone Beauty is understanding, I guess, my history, my personal history and my family's history. So this is a picture of my grandmother. Her name is Emily Paul, and Emily literally survived the residential or the Indian boarding school program. My grandmother was forced to stay in this school from the age of 6 until she was able to leave at the age of 16. And unfortunately, this experience was not a lovely boarding school or school experience. She would be physically punished for speaking our language, Anishinaabe-Moan, and she would be beaten, and there was no love. And because of that lack of love in that school system, I learned a term in learning about my grandmother's experience called transgenerational or generational trauma. And that's when one person, community, family is faced with a group of events that they are not equipped to deal with. And in my family's case, this was the residential school system. And unfortunately, it's not just my family. This has robbed nations of Indigenous people across North America of many, many things. And when I learned about this history, that's when I realized that I could possibly be part of changing a narrative and creating a new story for my family. Unfortunately, on this journey, it came with a lot of traumatic experiences. Up until this point in my life, this was the most painful experience I had to deal with, the loss of my brother BJ to suicide. But on this path of understanding generational trauma, I learned that my own addiction to alcohol, which I've overcome, and this year I'll celebrate 10 years of sobriety, woohoo, thank you. And sadly, losing my brother, and now most recently this past June in Vancouver, I lost another brother to fentanyl addiction. And even though our communities and I personally have faced so much trauma, I fully believe that this has made me stronger. As painful as that sounds, my experience in this kind of pain has helped me continue on this path of building a company that is now available in Sephora in Canada, and in JCPenney in the United States. But it wasn't a simple road, as you heard, that every entrepreneur has a massive journey that is loaded with ups and downs. And before all of that did happen, we decided to actually take a look at the entire beauty industry. In the last few years, we have worked on something at Cheekbone Beauty called the Indigenous Beauty Collective, and it's about changing the way beauty products are made. There's Cheekbone Beauty and 4 other Indigenous beauty brands that are part of our collective currently. We're welcoming many more from around the world. And the whole idea is we are all familiar as consumers with this idea of French beauty, Japanese beauty, Korean beauty. But I want the world to fully understand and recognize that when you hear the term Indigenous beauty, that means something different. It means something special. It means this is the group of people, because I've said it before and I'll say it again, Indigenous people are the OGs of sustainability. And that this group of people are the group of people that are changing how we think about beauty products. So at Cheekbone Beauty, from the harvesting of raw materials to the end of the life of a product, we've taken this concept, which is called life cycle thinking, life cycle analysis, and we've embedded it into everything that we do at Cheekbone Beauty. We took our very small amount of funding and built an Indigenous lab at our headquarters in St. Catharines, Ontario, where we actually develop formulations and we think about all the packaging that we're using. And the whole purpose is to ultimately, from the harvesting until the end of the life. So that whole entire process is extremely important. Our mission at Cheekbone Beauty is to help not only every Indigenous person on the planet see and feel their value in this world while we craft these sustainable cosmetics, but we don't want anything to end up in the landfill. So we work backwards to do that. So our Indigenous Innovation Lab was built with the idea of using Western science and Indigenous wisdom to make and create products. And how we look at that differently, because there's so much misinformation and a lot of unregulated information that comes from the beauty space, and that is even the raw materials. So not even thinking about the packaging, but thinking about the raw materials that we're putting on, whether it's our skin, our hair, our face, all of those will impact an ecosystem in some shape or form. And so at Cheekbone Beauty, it's really important that we think about all of our ingredients even being biodegradable. So we use the concepts that come from green chemistry in order to make our formulations in our Indigenous Innovation Lab in St. Catharines. We've won a lot of awards as a brand based on sustainability, something that I'm super, super proud of. But we always share that it needs to be so clear that sustainability is a journey. There is no end destination, and that this is a path that we as a brand and business have chosen to be really transparent on. This is one award we won back in 2022 from Canadian Business Magazine, where Shopify was the #1 innovative company in Canada, and my company, Cheekbone Beauty, was #4. And this project was really exciting. And I'm going to share some really important information with everyone in this room. I failed grade 9 science, and I cannot believe that I pay chemists and sustainability scientists, but they are the really smart ones that know all this stuff, and winning this award was magical. We've actually worked with Henry Appellum, a local winery, and a grape varietal that is only local to the Niagara region where we're headquartered, because most of the grapes that have come over from European vines have origins in Europe, but this grape varietal is actually a hybrid. So it's a really unique product that we've created and developed, and it's a raw ingredient, or an ingredient that we wanted to put in our products. And the reason was, once I entered the beauty space, I came from the food industry, remember? And I recognized that everyone is going to see what's on our ingredient list. And so what I wanted to do was create something that was uniquely patented and owned by us. And so we've extracted active ingredients, incredible active ingredients from grapes waste, so the stems, skins, and seeds that we want to put in our future products. We've proven the project works, we've proven the concept works, and we're very excited about what we're going to be doing in the future. So many incredible things have happened on this journey, like making the list of in Entrepreneur Magazine's 100 Women of Influence. And I always share this because this is, I guess, a moment that I get to brag, so I'll take every opportunity to do that. But J-Lo was on the front, and Kim Kardashian was actually on the next page, but her picture was smaller, so I was super excited that mine was bigger. So many celebrities and celebrity makeup artists have fallen in love with our brand because we do things differently. We've actually created our products to be 98% natural and actually effective. For so long, possibly many of you remember going into places like Whole Foods and you're trying the makeup and it's not very effective from the natural space. We've managed to create a brand that is, so super proud of that, including Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, who actually follows our brand. But Blake used our Unify Multi-Pencils, which is our hero product, at the Super Bowl last year with Taylor Swift, and that was a really exciting moment for us. So many things have happened on this journey, and one of the things that I constantly discuss and have talked about over the years is this whole idea of representation and how much it matters, and that I fully believe that it saves lives. Losing my brother to suicide was so painful, but I really started to understand him and the reason why representation matters after I had this incredible experience at the Eaton Centre in Toronto. So launching our brand in Sephora, we get to do all these incredible activations inside stores. So this June, a few months ago, I was in store and getting to put products on customers, and this little girl walks in with her family. And when my brother was still alive, if there was an indigenous or native person doing anything cool, I would get a direct message from him about what was happening. And I realize now it's because he saw himself in those people. He felt seen. And as a brand, that's always been our intention, to help our community feel seen and be seen, but also using our ancient wisdom to make and create the most incredible products on the planet. But this little girl comes into the Sephora with her family, and she's Ojibwe, and that's the nation that I'm from. So automatically I recognize, because it was regular Sephora customers, which weren't as exciting as this little girl, quite frankly. So she comes in and she was all excited to meet me, and she's telling me about her TikTok account and how it went viral and how she's had to shut it down, and her little brother was like, no, it isn't. And I just thought they were the sweetest things. But when I was a little girl, I remember going into the Eaton Center with my dad, and never in a million years did I ever think I would own a brand that's one day available in a store like Sephora. I grew up in Native public housing, and today I have a brand that's available in a store like Sephora. And what I love about this is that little girl and her little brother that met me that day are never going to wonder what's possible for them, because they just met someone who looks like them and who comes from a community like them that built a brand that's available in Sephora. So quite possibly, if we paid attention to Indigenous communities and Indigenous wisdom and felt represented and seen, perhaps we would save more lives and include the planet in that as well. All living things. Thank you.
Whether your background looks like Jen's or looks like someone who sat in the panel up here before, I hope that you're finding yourself in someone on stage. And I hope that you're finding on stage some inspirations just like Jen's, which I think is the best example I've heard for what Anthony Bug Levine urged us all to do, to turn intention into action. Jen just gave us an incredible example of that. I'm so inspired this morning. All right, folks, get ready, because Salim Ismail is in the house. He is known for making big things happen at lightning speed. Salim literally wrote the book on taking companies to the next level, exponential organizations. But today, he's here with a fresh perspective, ready to dive into why smaller, local, and deeper approaches are the true future of scale. He's speaking to my food systems loving heart with this. As a board member of XPRIZE, Salim has been at the forefront of driving innovation globally, and he brings with them a global perspective, having spent over a year living in each of 8 different countries around the world. Please join me in welcoming Salim Ismail to the stage.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I want to talk through 2 main categories in my slides this morning, which is first, what's happening with technology and why, and the broader implications of that. And then I'm going to take a little twist to talk about the systemic change that I see happening, which I think you might find a little unexpected. You've heard my background. I'm Canadian. I'm from India originally. It turns out Jen and I are from the same hometown in Canada. So we'll have an interesting conversation afterwards. Really, my journey started, I was the head of innovation at Yahoo, running their incubator, learned a fundamental lesson that when you try anything disruptive in legacy environment, the immune system attacks you, right? Because all of our organizations and all of our institutions are built to resist change and withstand risk. And dealing with that is almost all of the work I've been doing over the last decade. If you're familiar with Singularity University, I'm the founding CEO there and built it out for a few years. And then I wrote this book called Exponential Organizations, which I won't cover here, but we talk about how do you scale an organization as fast as you can scale technology. And as you're building projects, thinking about that, a very important part of this is this model is what we call your massive transformative purpose. What fundamental problem are you trying to solve? And many of you have a natural, what we call an MTP, because of the purpose-driven mission of many of your organizations. I joined recently the board of the XPRIZE Foundation, which has some interesting characters on it. Every board meeting starts with what did Elon just do, and then we move on to the rest of the business of the day. If you're familiar with XPRIZE, we crowdsource breakthrough innovation in areas where governments aren't doing enough and private sector is not doing enough. There are 2 prizes we have right now that we're very, very excited about. The first is a carbon extraction prize. Can you extract carbon at scale out of the atmosphere? It's a $100 million prize funded by Elon to see, can we do this? Because there's no other way of dealing with this. It's clear that nation states can't solve climate change. Right? We need a technological solution. What we're really excited about, we're into the semifinals of this prize where we have to have viable solutions that really work now. Can they scale to a global level? And there's several hundred teams that have qualified for those semifinals. So we're really excited about the possibilities there. Another prize we have going is the Age Reversal X Prize. Somebody will win $101 million if they can successfully reverse aging by 20 years in each of musculature, neural retention, and immune system. And that's going to happen in the next few years. That will have some rather broad implications for pension plans, retirement planning, unemployment benefits, et cetera, et cetera. I actually had a conversation at the Vatican about this, and I made the comment that your business model is to sell heaven, and how are you going to sell heaven if people aren't dying? Right? It's an interesting discussion that led to some rather rich commentary coming back from the other side. Let me touch on what's happening with technology that's completely unique today. There's two things that we've never seen before. We're seeing the exponential growth of a very large number of technologies today. We're seeing Moore's law apply across now a dozen technologies. And never before have we seen this many technologies all accelerate at the same time. Throughout history, maybe one technology is accelerating or another. Now we have a whole dozen of them moving at a very, very rapid pace, and that's affording some really fascinating consequences as a result. Just as one example, vertical farming is now crossing over into economic viability. We've been doing horizontal farming from the beginning of time, the second oldest industry, but now we can drip feed water to the plants, et cetera, and we know what nutrients, because of the sensors, we can tell exactly what nutrients the plants need. 70% of our fresh water goes to agriculture today, and most of it runs off. When we do vertical farming, we save 99% of fresh water. Right? And so there's some huge implications that come from that. The best calculation that we have seen is that if you took 35 skyscrapers in Manhattan and turned them into vertical farms, just that would feed the entire city sustainably. Right? And so think about the implications of that in terms of food security, freshness, decentralized systems, et cetera, really profound possibilities. This is our old way of doing vertical farming. This is obviously very hard, and we should avoid this at all possible. I don't have time to go through all of these, but I wanted to give you a small glimpse of this. The problem that I see as we have all this technological innovation coming, and the way we frame it is that we have 20 Gutenberg moments hitting us at the same time. In the 15th century, the printing press emerged, democratized literature, and we call that now a Gutenberg moment because it fundamentally changed society. Well, blockchain fundamentally changes society. AI fundamentally changes society. Solar energy does. And how are we going to absorb 20 such major civilization-shifting paradigms? And that is the real challenge for all of us. The big problem that I see is all of our institutions can't stand up to this pace of change. Healthcare systems, legal systems, intellectual property, all designed for the medieval world. E.O. Wilson, the famous biologist, I think, put it best. He said, the problem we have is our emotions are Paleolithic, our institutions are medieval, and our technology is godlike. And pretty much all the problems in the world come from a gap in those three layers, right? And how pretty much as leaders, we'll spend the next 20 years trying to deal with this. Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I put this in a very humorous way. He said, anything that's anything in the world when you're born, that's normal. Anything invented when you're young, that's a career. And anything invented after you're 35 years old is just bad. It's just bad for the world, right? Talk to any banker about Bitcoin and you'll see them get hives and try and cope with this new paradigm. And how will we deal with this? The second exciting thing about technology that we're amazingly excited about is the sheer drop in cost. And what I mean by that is throughout human history, it's always been true that advanced technologies cost a lot. And only a government lab or a big corporate lab could do R&D, launch new products and services. Today, for the first time in human history, advanced technologies are very cheap. Sensors are cheap, solar energy is cheap, blockchains are open source and free, et cetera. You can spend $1 million a month on AI or $20 a month on AI and you get the same results. Right, this is an unbelievable phenomenon that we've seen. You can see the drop in price across all of these. When we were launching space shuttles, it was about $600 million per space shuttle launch. SpaceX dropped that by 10 times down to 60 million. And now we have relativity space. They're 3D printing the rocket engines, and they're going to be able to do it for $6 million. Right? Think about that. That's a 100x drop in a domain. And this isn't some Silicon Valley digital media gaming type of thing. This is physical rockets trying to get out of the gravity well of Earth. And even there, we've seen a 100x drop. So we're incredibly excited with what this affords. This means that we're democratizing technology in an unbelievable way. And all the domains and technologies are going through this type of a curve where we disrupt the status quo very radically. Vitalik Buterin, middle-class kid out of Toronto, ignores his professors, gets together with a few friends, and boom, you have a $400 billion ecosystem. And to show you this is not a Silicon Valley phenomenon, this is a car that was created this is the third fastest car in the world. 900 horsepower. It looks rather attractive. This was engineered and designed and built in Sri Lanka, okay, that hotbed of automotive innovation. I'm going to suggest if you can do something like this there with no ecosystem, no education, no experience, no investors, you can pretty much do anything anywhere. So what we're hoping to see is an explosion of very disruptive innovation coming from every corner of the world. Okay? So that's the big, huge things about technology, the drop in cost, plus the fact that we're democratizing it very rapidly. Let me do a quick, weird shift. The systemic way that I've found of framing this is male versus female archetypes. And you see on the left there the characteristics of what we call a male archetype. On the right, female archetypes. And I mean archetype, not gender, right? Very importantly. And we've been ratcheting back and forth throughout history, going from top-down religious structures to feudal systems to democracy. Science was a democratizing force, et cetera, et cetera. Today, we run the world. As we're moving the world to abundance, we're running the world on a set of very male-type archetypal patterns. Judeo-Christian religions, corporations, military-industrial complex, right? But as we move to abundance and we get more and more technology and more democratization, you really want a female archetype running the world. Because when the male archetype runs the world, it relates to abundance as... I haven't quite finished yet. Okay. So the problem we have is the male archetype, when it meets abundance, relates to it as power, tries to hoard it. The female archetype meets abundance and shares it around. And as we have technology moving us to abundance, you really want a female archetype running the world. And we're seeing the emergence of that. Burning Man, the open source movement, the DIY movement, many of the projects you're running are in that way. So as you think about the projects you're running, try and have them be as decentralized as possible. You can now do very disruptive innovation at almost zero cost and iterate only when you see success. And that, I think, gives us unbelievable potential for the future. I'll end with this example. This is an 8-inch diameter pad created by this company, Wellways. And those dots that you see are very sensitive nanotemperature sensors. If you're a woman, you put this left and right side of your chest for 10 minutes at home. It does a very sensitive temperature measurement across that part of the body. This turns out to be 80% better at detecting breast cancer than a mammogram. Costs like $20, and it's FDA approved. We can now eradicate breast cancer by just giving this out all over the world. That's why we get excited about technology. And I hope as you think about the potential for taking technologies, using them disruptively in a democratized, a decentralized way, the world becomes very quickly very, very amazing. Thank you very much. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, thank you, Salim. I will be feeling the female archetype energy, and your words will continue to resonate in my mind for at least the next 3 days, hopefully beyond. So let's take a quick vibe check, shall we? How are we feeling today? Okay. What if I ask again? How are we feeling today? Good? Okay. We've had some amazing energy in the room already. And I'm even more excited about what's coming next. You're about to hear from someone who's truly shaped the global movement for climate action. Are you ready for that? Yeah? Friends, it's an immense privilege to introduce Cristiana Figueres, a trailblazing force behind the Paris Agreement, where she helped unite 195 nations to combat climate change globally. She's the former executive secretary of the UNFCCC, and a true visionary. She continues to inspire through her work at the nonprofit she founded, Global Optimism. She has counted many firsts across her career, but the most important first she is working on right now is the process of very soon becoming, for the first time, a grandmother. Please join me in welcoming the unstoppable Cristiana Figueres. Thank you so much, Cristiana. So we're going to be in conversation today, and it's so humbling to be sitting in front of you, one of the most skilled negotiators of the current era. How does one get 195 countries to sign and agree on an issue as dividing as the climate crisis?
It's pretty simple.
Okay, good.
You make sure that all the representatives of all 196 governments that have to agree to this are in the room. Then you lock the doors. And you say, no bathroom, no water, no food, until everybody signs on the dotted line. And it's amazing how quickly things happen.
I love it. So now let's go straight to the urgent question at hand.
But can I actually give a serious answer to that?
Yes, please, actually.
Because I think it's very pertinent for the conversation we're having today. And that is how debilitating and how weakening it is to live within the constraints of two mental boundaries that we have invented for ourselves. One mental boundary is short-term thinking, planning, and acting. That is something that we have invented. It does not come from nature. Right. We have invented and we have self-imposed and constrained ourselves. And the other mental boundary is the boundary of a nation state. And that is also not in nature. Tell me one time a plant has a passport. Right. You know, I'm Costa Rican. No, I'm Panamanian. No, I am Indian. It just doesn't occur. And so the process to go to the Paris Agreement was really a 5-year effort of inviting all these government representatives to pierce beyond those two boundaries. Tell me what the long-term vision is for your country. That's more important than the short term. And if that is your long-term vision, what does the world at large have to do, and where do we need to move in order to facilitate that vision? So it was the process of breaking through those two main boundaries that eventually allowed for them to agree to something that sort of makes sense.
Thank you so much. That actually speaks a lot to your style of leadership, and I've had a chance to learn more about your work in the last few months as well. But before we get deeper into that, I wanted to ask you about really the sense of urgency. Last year, actually, a theme at this very conference was urgency, and this year we're talking about systemic change. When it comes to the climate crisis, how are we doing? And by we, I mean the humanity, the people that are alive now.
We're doing great and terrible at the same time. So when you look at a couple of the sectors that need to transform, and you all will know this better than myself, everything to do with renewable energy technologies has progressed exponentially in terms of performance and long-term vision for investment. But what has not occurred is we have not exponentialized, which is my new verb that I invite you all to use. We need to exponentiate everything. So we have not exponentiated all sectors. We have actually been able to do it with specific sectors, with renewables, with batteries, now moving into hydrogen. So with a couple of these that are then allowing for at least light transport to move forward and progress. But then we have all the nature sectors that have not been exponentiated by us because we are still thinking and acting within the boundary of a business model that doesn't make sense for nature. And we have not been able to break through that to say, okay, so what is the business model that would attract for nature the kinds of investments that we're seeing into solar, for example? And again, that's why I started with mental boundaries, because that's about the mental boundary. And sometimes we think that the mental boundary is actually a real one. It isn't. Yeah. It is just the way that we think.
Oh, that's actually really interesting that you're mentioning that. Later in this conference, we're actually going to be having a whole session around how to put nature on the balance sheet, right? How to go beyond these mental boundaries of what goes into a balance sheet and really start thinking about, like you said, that nature-based business models. Thank you. So you said you were doing great. And in what senses are we doing terrible? How urgent is this?
Well, it truly is very urgent because science has been pellucidly clear about saying that we have to be at 1/2 current global emissions globally by the end of this century. And that is now just 5 years away. So how are we doing on that? Well, on the energy side, we're doing pretty well because we now know that we're at a plateau in emissions that come from the energy sector, mostly because we have invested almost 2 times as much into renewable energies last year, this year it'll be more, than into fossil fuels. And so all the new energy is coming from renewables, which is great. So we're at a plateau of emissions, and that's really good news, and not enough, because we have to actually descend those emissions. They need to be on the descent, not just plateauing. But it is, frankly, more than I thought was possible 5 years ago. So it is impressive that once we decide that we want to move in a certain direction, we can actually bring our creativity and all of our skills to bear to speed the solutions to scale, because we need both. We need the speed and the scale to work together. So for me, the mantra is, let's speed the solutions to scale. And that has to be across all sectors, all countries, do not leave the South behind. And it has to be done with an incredible, deep sense of justice.
Thank you. So we're facing an urgent situation. We're facing crisis. In the last, the last 4 weeks only, more of us have experienced firsthand the effects of extreme weather conditions. I myself had to be evacuated from my own home from forest fires, and right now my country's experiencing the worst drought in 70 years, where we don't have power for 14 hours a day. So there is this temptation to feel like this is urgent and that this is so imminent, and that it's waking up that fear factor in our brains. And that has led to a lot of anxiety, burnout. It has led to a lot of us wondering if we should just cut corners and get to, the source of the problem. Is this the way we should be going about it? I know we've had a conversation about the what we need to solve climate crisis, but how? Because in the process of the what, in the battlefield, we are losing a lot of incredible climate activists, climate financiers, climate leaders that are really questioning where is it that we're going. I don't know. I would love to hear from you.
Well, it is admittedly frustrating. I'm the queen of frustration, perhaps, since I've been at this for more than 30 years. And so I really understand that. It's not that I understand it in my head. In my heart and in my gut, I really get it. I really resonate with so many well-intentioned, brilliant act of people who go like, what the? Why are we still here? Why can we not accelerate this? And I really get it. And on top of that, you have to also resonate with the pain of the destruction of nature that we're seeing. So it's both the frustration of progress that is not going at the speed and scale that it should, plus the pain of the destruction of nature. And I get that. And here's the choice. If we allow for that pain, frustration, anger, burnout, how many of my colleagues have had burnout, me included, if you let all of that paralyze your work, paralyze your thinking, then you can no longer act out of agency. Then we have become actually victims of exactly that which we are trying to change. And so the choice is very much about, yes, how can I turn to this frustration, to the scientific knowledge of what we have, to face the superstorms, the monster fires? How can we face that, embrace it, and here's the alchemy, how do we use the energy that all of that information or personal experience has? How do we transmute it? How do we use it as compost, if you will, in order to generate an energy that needs to be there, that is the energy that does catapult our agency to make the changes that we need. But it is a choice. I have to make the choice every single day, because honestly, media gives us all the bad news, and I take all the bad news, and then I go, right, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to let myself get paralyzed, or am I going to transform that and use it as my compost to then stand up and step into the best of my agency? And I think that's a personal choice and decision we have to make every single day.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that regaining of the sense of agency is a gift you've received, and that you've also highlighted as probably one of the most important issues facing the climate crisis. How do you give shape to the work that you're doing in global optimism, to give shape to giving climate leaders agency? How does that look? Who are you partnering with? Can you tell us more a little bit about about this issue that you have chosen to prioritize above all other issues within the climate crisis?
Yeah, we're very concerned because I do feel that so many of my colleagues, I used to know everyone who worked in climate change. Thank God I don't anymore, because it is hundreds of thousands of people, which is fantastic. But I do resonate and understand with the pain that is in the community, both in climate and in nature protection. And so I am chosen to devote quite a bit of my energy and time into supporting those that are in deep, dark holes, because we need them, because those who have succumbed to the pain are warriors that we have lost in the battle, and we can't lose one single warrior. And so a lot of my time is in supporting these people, and we do retreats, regional retreats. We've done 4, we're going to do 2 more in Africa and in the South Pacific, to invite these people to come and understand their pain, talk about, what did we call Paleolithic emotions? Was that the term that we saw there? To really understand their pain and understand how that can then be transposed, how it can be transformed in order for these people to regain their power and their impact. Because every single one of us that works on these issues has to be at our utmost in impact. And then the question is, once we do the self-work, right, that's where it starts. It starts with ourselves. Then the question is, and how then do we go out into all of the different organizations and spheres of influence that we all have and bring that same knowledge, that same magic almost, about how do we really build our personal resilience. And then to the third level, which is the worldview. What is the worldview that we are creating here? Because ironically, systems change, which is what we all want, is deeply personal. That's where it starts. But it has to start inside of us, and then we have to be mindful that that clarity that we get for ourselves is a clarity that we align so that I am the same person as a person, I am the same person in my family, in my job, with my colleagues, and I am the same person vis-a-vis the planet. You cannot be one person at home with yourself or with your family or with my oncoming grandchild, and then be another person at the office or with your colleagues and another person with respect to what you want to see in the world. That just doesn't work. So it's about aligning ourselves through all three different levels of the system in order to optimize our positive, disruptive, creative energies.
Thank you so much for that. And I can see how this magnetism that you're talking about, it makes it also a very for a very effective, pragmatic, set of tools for negotiations.
In addition to locking
in addition to all the other work, of course.
Locking the room.
Yes, yes, locking the room. So I wanted to maybe touch upon systems change, because you talked about systemic change. One of the insights we've actually found when observing systemic change examples is that they often come from collaborations that you wouldn't usually imagine. So here we have a top negotiator, in international agreements, partners with whom to create these incredible retreats, to which I have to say, I was very fortunate to get an invitation. Christiana Figueres is inviting you to this incredible thing. And I'm like, ooh, this gotta be like really, you gotta, iron out my suit. And it turned out to be the most incredible deep retreat, but with the most unexpected partners. So I'm going to let you tell about that.
Yeah, thank you. They are very unexpected partners for people outside, not for me, because I am, and I've been very public about this now for 10 years, I have been a student of Buddhism in the Plum Village tradition, which was founded by Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. And after 10 years, I went to the monastics and I went, okay, you have all of this magic, you have all of this knowledge. Why are we keeping it here, under a little roof? This has got to be shared widely. And I could only draw from my own experience of having been literally saved from suicide through the understanding that comes out of a Buddhist tradition that doesn't seek to convince anybody of Buddhism. It is basically a Buddhist tradition that tweaks life principles, life lessons for those of us who are working on so many different challenges. And so for 2 years now, I've been partnering with these monastics who have been the most ardent students of climate change and biodiversity. And they have now curated lessons for those of us in the climate community, in the biodiversity protection community, in the ocean protection community. And they open their doors to those of us who are in pain. And we do a week, and we come out literally transformed, not without pain, but knowing how to manage the pain, how to manage the suffering, how to transform that into the energies that really make a positive difference. So it's almost like a martial art skill that you take the sword and you turn it around and you become so much more impactful, so much more powerful in your presence, in the work that that you can do. And we've had, I don't know, 400, 500 people come through this process, and it's all about, for us, it's not about critical mass, it's about critical connection. It's about critical connection with self, with others, and with the world. And it has, the surveys that we have and the feedback that we have is that it has been probably the most important week in most people's lives.
Thank you. I can definitely attest to that. It was incredible. So there's so much science that goes into climate change. Of course, you understand that, everyone that is really looking at the COP and the future of the climate agreements, understands the science, which is why I thought it was so pertinent that this program, or one part of this program, is also called Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. So thank you so much, Christiana, for talking to us about both science and art and saving our planet. Thank you so much. Please welcome Nina.
Well, folks, you heard it here first. If you're having a hard time closing a deal, you invite everyone into the room and you lock the door and you withhold food and water until everyone signs on the dotted line. Thank you, Christiana, for the very tactical, helpful advice. It's my absolute honor right now to introduce Helena Gualinga, a powerful voice in the global fight for climate justice. Helena is from the Quechua Sariacu community in Ecuador. She's taken her activism from the Amazon to the world stage, including COP25 and the World Economic Forum. She's the co-founder of the Polluters Out movement and Muyu.tv. She's relentless in her efforts to protect indigenous lands and hold corporations accountable. She has an upcoming documentary about the Yasuni National Park, and her passion is a force for change. We're truly privileged to have her with us today. Please join me in welcoming Helena Gualinga.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing? You're good? There's a dilemma with public speaking and earrings, so I'm gonna try to be very still so that the audio isn't bothered by my earrings. And yeah, girl dilemmas. Catalyzing change. I'm sure we've all seen the apocalyptic images coming out from across the world, from hurricanes, floods, people's entire homes, stories, histories being wiped out. In my home, in the Amazon rainforest, we've seen the man-made fires, the drought caused by climate change, devastating an entire ecosystem. As a result, my country, Ecuador, is now facing serious challenges with power shortages up to 14 hours. And we don't really know when this is going to change. So how do we catalyze change for countries like Ecuador and Amazonian countries? While this is going on, oil is still being pumped out of this precious rainforest that is my home. And mining is expanding and destroying the last healthy waterways. This past decade of my life, I've spent advocating, campaigning, organizing to create change, along with my peers, my elders, activists, and I've learned a couple of things about what actually works when it comes to protecting the Amazon rainforest, creating true change. And it didn't take me a decade to realize this, but I do understand it differently now. What is clear to me is that in order to protect this precious place, we need to work with indigenous communities. Indigenous peoples and land defenders have been holding the front lines for decades. A clear example is the struggle of my own community that a little bit over 10 years ago managed to kick out an oil company and prevented oil drilling in my territory. Another success story is last year when Ecuador voted to halt oil drilling in the heart of the Yasuni National Park through a national referendum. Something that never really has happened before, which is climate democracy, where people actually actively can participate in how we're going to address the climate crisis. Are we going to continue to exploit oil or are we not? And Ecuadorians had the opportunity to actually vote. But even though we know that indigenous people protect large amounts of the planet's biodiversity and ecosystems, there is a huge gap when it comes to access to adequate resources. But for people like me, and for people that are seeing their homes being wiped away by floods and hurricanes and fires and all these things that are happening around the world, we cannot really sit around and wait for change to happen, for system change to happen, for the system to change from within, for philanthropy to act fast enough, for impact investment to act fast enough to do good enough. Because we've had a few decades to work on that, and here we are, facing these multiple crises. I know investment is all about the metrics and the revenue, but when it comes to actually doing impact investment, today it's about halting the destruction of the ecosystems, of the precious ecosystems that we have around the world, like my home, the Amazon rainforest. And the real revenue is that we will have healthy communities and a healthy planet, living ecosystems, living stories and generations that will continue to have the legacies of our ancestors. When we talk about investments, sometimes it's confused with a few drops in the sea. But if we want to see real change, then it needs to be long-term commitments. It needs to be in adequate amounts. It needs to be working directly with communities, land defenders, and indigenous governing bodies. If indigenous peoples would not have put in the work and made the sacrifices that indigenous people have been making for the past few decades, then places like the Amazon rainforest would no longer exist. And I am here because, as I said, we don't have time anymore to wait around for change to happen. We really need to start challenging the ways that things have been done in the past few decades. We cannot wait for the economy to adapt to these crises. We need people like you to be disruptors within what you do, to be allies to those who are on the front lines, who are holding that front line, and who will continue to do so, whose children will continue to do so. For me, it really began when the oil companies tried to enter my community, and it is a lifelong commitment for me to continue protecting the rainforest. And if every single one of you can make such a commitment through your work and commit to truly disrupt the systems that are in place that continue to allow for these atrocities to happen, I think that change will come way sooner and way faster than it is right now. Thank you so much.
Helena, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I always love hearing you talk because your serenity, but also your power, is particularly effective in getting people to really rethink what they're doing. As we wrap up this plenary, we are looking towards the future with Dominic Hofstetter, a leader dedicated to reshaping ecosystems for impact. Dominic is the executive director of the Transformation Capital Initiative, whose mission is to build the field of systemic investing. Dominic has a knack for seeing the big picture and helping us connect the dots. So let's tune in for a forward-looking perspective on how we can continue to do that and evolve. Also, I've heard that he brought a prop that almost didn't make it through security, so I can't wait to see that for this talk and find out what it is. So please welcome Dominic Hofstetter. Thank
you. Switzerland, a country known for cheese, mountains, tax evasion, but we don't talk about this here. And of course, the Swiss Army knife. Now, this is a Swiss Army knife that was given to me at the start of basic training in the Swiss Armed Forces. So it is an actual Swiss Army knife. It has 4 tools, which collectively serve 7 functions, like cutting or opening a bottle. And it represents the future of impact investing, philanthropy, and development finance. Now, why that is, I'll tell you in a minute. But first, let's look at what the present of these fields look like using the American food system as an example. Here's a visual depiction of the American food system today. It is characterized by industrial meat production, mechanized monocropping, and ultra-processed foods. And as such, it contributes to climate change, soil degradation, and obesity. And here's an AI's vision of a sustainable, healthy, and equitable food system. This looks and feels very differently. Now, many impact investors might subscribe to this vision that we need a deep and structural change to the way we grow, process, consume, and dispose of food. But many are actually ill-positioned to catalyze this kind of change. And that's because they operate from the perspective of a single type of money. For many of you in the audience today, that's either market rate investment capital, concessional capital, or grants. For those working in corporations, it's balance sheet investments or supply chain finance. And for those working in government, it's public procurement and subsidies. When we look at a system through the narrow lens of a particular capital type, we tend to see only individual nodes. Venture investors tend to see startups in precision agriculture or alternative proteins. Infrastructure investors tend to see food processing facilities and agri-PV plants. Infrastructure or real estate investors tend to see farmland and green buildings. Carbon market specialists see biochar projects, and foundations see community art center and consumer awareness campaigns. Looking through a system through a narrow lens lets us see some of the nodes, but only those nodes that are shaped by that particular lens. It makes us miss all the other nodes, the connections between those nodes, the leverage points, and the emerging property of the system at large. To see the full system, we need a systems lens. The components of this lens are provided by systems thinking, systems innovation, and complex system science. And if we use it, we will bring to the surface the entire complexity of a system and uncover its secrets. Here's an example from our prototype around regenerative agriculture in the American Midwest. What you're looking at is what we call a transitions map. It is a cross between a causal loop diagram and the theory of change, with a problem layer, a solution layer, and an actor layer. It shows us all the nodes in that system and their relationships, and it lets us understand the system's financing needs. And based on those insights, we can develop a capital deployment strategy capable of moving the system from its current extractive status quo to a regenerative future. Importantly, the map also led us to some surprising findings. It turns out that for this system to transform itself, it does not come down so much to new technologies on, say, precision agriculture or new food products, which is where most of the energy and impact investing currently is. Instead, this system needs capacity building for farmers. It needs insurance companies to change their underwriting practices. It needs more food processing facilities in the middle of the supply chain. And it needs an effort to build the market for regenerative products through advanced market commitments from corporations. So what's important is that these solutions aren't just a collection of isolated innovations, but that they come together in an integrated portfolio designed for specific places and supply chains. Because in some sense, all systems are local. Adopting a system lens means that we'll see more. But seeing more isn't where it stops. If we really want to change system, we also need to change the practice of capital deployment, which brings me back to the Swiss Army knife. But to grasp the relevance of the knife, we first need to understand that systems change is rarely the result of a single technology, single social enterprise, or single piece of physical infrastructure. It most often results as the combined effects of many interrelated shifts happening in a system at once and with a degree of shared directionality. Meaning, if we want to change systems, we have to intervene at different nodes of that system at the same time. And the interventions that need to happen across technology, business models, policy, social norms and values, narratives, etc., tend to have their own funding needs. Some are perfectly investable with market rate investment capital or concessional capital. Some require grants. Some require risk transfer mechanisms like new insurance products or advanced market commitments. And most of them benefit from a change in the tax code or in subsidy schemes. So the essence of systemic investing, of funding systems change, boils down to creating what we call an investment architecture that spans multiple capital types and is steeped in the system's actual financing needs, and then matching the right kind of capital to the right interventions at the right moment in time. In other words, knowing which tool of your army knife to use for which problem at which moment in time. And this is not at all how impact investing works today, because all too often we start with our capabilities and the kind of money we have access to. So if I'm a venture investor with access to venture capital, I'm going to start a new venture capital fund, whether or not the system I'm trying to change actually needs more VC. So moving from a systems optimization to a systems transformation objective has profound implications for the practice of purpose-driven capital deployment. It requires that we build strategic portfolios, not just thematic ones, and that we try to bring the assets, the investees and grantees in that portfolio into synergistic alignment with each other so that we can generate combinatorial effects. It also requires that we rethink how we design investment and funding vehicles around governance, incentive structures, terms, etc. It asks us that we build funder and investor coalitions across the public, private, and philanthropic sectors, not just on a deal-by-deal basis, like in blended finance, but in long-term strategic coalitions, ideally orchestrated by financial backbones that generate the systemic intelligence, do the convening, and orchestrate the capital flows. The investment portfolios that emerge should ideally be nested within a broader systems intervention approach that seeks alignment with NGOs, research institutions, community organizations, or other actors that investors typically don't collaborate with. And finally, we need to also rethink the way we make sense of impact, moving from output metrics at the level of individual companies or social enterprises to systems health at large. Enter some of the pioneers of this way of working. In their ocean strategy, Builder's Vision is working across the entire capital spectrum, deploying grants, catalytic capital, and market rate investment capital into startups, established companies, research institutions, and NGOs to build the future elements of the blue economy. The Think family has taken a similar multi-capital approach to addressing food waste in the United States. And the Groundbreak Coalition in Minneapolis and St. Paul's uses a mix of concessional loans, guarantees, and grants to close the racial wealth gap through helping Black people become homeowners and entrepreneurs. As examples of systemic investing, these efforts are pioneering, but they're still in their infancies. So the collective mission we're looking at here is to build the infrastructure of systemic investing so that systemic investing can become the new paradigm at the heart of impact investing, philanthropy, and development finance. That means doing the research to develop methods, tools, and frameworks, running more and bigger prototypes to understand what systemic investing could look like in practice, and then building the field through convenings, through education, and through storytelling. And not just in the food system, in climate change, in biodiversity, around mental illness, homelessness, any other social and environmental issue that is fundamentally systemic and complex in nature. Now, I'm going to close with an anecdote, a quote from an impact investor that I recently spoke to. He said, "It's very likely that our portfolio will be vastly impactful, but that the system we care about will still deteriorate." And this captures well what's going on at the moment in impact investing. We all have impressive success stories to tell, but 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries are being breached. And planetary boundaries are system-level KPIs. And 83% of SDGs are not on track. So arguably what we're doing is we're creating islands of sustainability in a sea of the poly crisis. What gives me hope is that we essentially have all the solutions we need to build the future we want. And many of them are represented here in the room or at the conference at large by the innovators and entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs who are in the audience. But the key question is, how will it all come together? Because if you want to see systems change, it's not just enough to build the individual pieces of the puzzle. It also has to ladder up. In other words, we have to learn how to not only spin the threads, but also weave the cloth. And in order to do such weaving, we need to put on a systems lens, and we need to take a Swiss Army knife approach to capital deployment. In other words, we all have to evolve into systemic investors. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dominic. That was incredible. And I feel like we are all going to be walking out of here with a brand new pair of system lenses. So once again, what an immense privilege to have you all here. We would like to encourage you to reconnect to your original intention, as we did in that little exercise earlier today. That spark that brought you here needs to stay alive. In a year like 2024, it is more critical than ever for our community to extend our gaze beyond our immediate spheres of influence. We don't want to look like that picture that Dominic just showed here. We need to think similar systemically towards collective action, democratic dialogue, and policy leaps that can bring about an impactful and scalable change. I can't wait to hear about all the collaborations and all the systemic changes that are going to be catalyzed over the next 3 years with you all.
The collaborations Michelle mentioned have the potential to not just be great deals or create strong friendships, but also to bring healing. I remember the words that Manari Ushigua shared with us this morning. Out on the grass and under the tree, he said, every conversation and every word that we use needs to have a medicine at the core to heal the earth. And when we heal the earth, we heal ourselves. I'll be striving to hold those roots of healing and the mandate to act in my hands as I go through these 3 days at SOCAP.
Michelle, Katie, this is my first time at SOCAP, and I'm loving it. Friends, let's put on our term sheets for the next 3 days, securing an ROI not just on our capital, but on the time, goodwill, and connections we're investing in. Let's double down on due diligence when it comes to showing up with benevolence, offering equity in care, and leveraging our collective impact. Now I wonder, is this the time that I gaga dance?
This is the time you gaga dance.
Here is to going deeper, closing the deal on making the world a better place. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for being
Welcome
here.
to SOCAP, everyone. Thank you.